I don't hear a theme song. Is there a theme song?
It's on.
Okay.
Well, actually, they didn't really win the game.
Or people are just like listening to 30 seconds.
They can hear you.
I assume so. Yeah. I can't hear.
Yeah, that's right. The Survivor Know-It-Alls are back here on Black Friday, and I gotta turn this off, and I gotta make the music stop. And yes,
Woo!
Stephen, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.
To you and yours. I'm so thankful to be here.
Happy Black Friday. Happy Honda days. Yes,
you're getting
it's all
great
happening.
deals on Insights. Fishies for free. 50%
off
all fishies. Well, 50% off all fishies, which are free already. So half off of nothing.
Wow.
Worth nothing.
Okay. All right, Stephen, you and I are both on the road. Look at our dedication to be here for Survivor Know-It-Alls this week.
Wow, you look like
Friday.
Do you bring your studio with you? Do you have it are you in a train?
Yes.
Yeah. A train car? Like that's like the mobile Rob studio?
Yep. So we're here to make it all happen. And Stephen is on the West Coast here with us today. And so very excited to get together here for a holiday edition of Survivor Know-It-Alls. Stephen, how was your holiday?
It was lovely. I had some pie. I had all the other things.
Oh, what pie do you have?
Well, pecan pie is my number one. I have pecan pie, pumpkin pie, apple pie. But I do feel like you should get credit for the treats you don't eat rather than, getting calories for the things you do eat.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so you want like a
negative calories to reward my discipline when I'm choosing not to have. If I have half a piece of pie, I should get credit for the half I don't eat rather than the calories of the half I do eat.
Yeah. Okay. Look, this is emergent gameplay for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Like
that's right. The game is flawed.
Check out everything I didn't eat.
Yeah.
Here's my picture. All right. Stephen, Wednesday night. Can you remember back to it from Survivor night?
I watched Thursday and because I'm with my kids, I watched in 10-minute increments. So it's all just it's like a hazy series of images from a dream.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was exciting.
It was exciting, and we can talk through everything from this latest episode. And it wasn't.
We should do that.
That's a good idea for sure. Let me just share with everybody. Of course, it is Black Friday, and so we want to be in the spirit of the season. And so we've got a great offer out there for anybody who is on the fence of joining our Underdog Alliance of patrons. That's right. You can now get in and check this out. 47% off your first month of Patreon. The biggest discount I think we've ever done. And
that's such an arbitrary and reductive percent. Why the 40? Oh, season 47. I guess that's not arbitrary. Okay. It took me a second.
Maybe reductive, not arbitrary. And you can do that with the promo code RHAP Holidays. Check it out. 1 month, 47% off. And a great way to get in on everything we got going on here on Patreon. Just did a 2.5-hour call with the patrons answering questions about this episode. So locked and loaded to talk about this most recent episode. But Stephen, some people felt like that this episode was not super exciting in terms of the outcome of this vote.
Yeah. I do this down the line vote, right? They've been talking about getting Kyle out. Kyle lost immunity. Everyone voted out Kyle. There was kind of but honestly, this is what a lot of old Survivor episodes that, we all talk about how much we love classic Survivor. And this was a lot of classic Survivor episodes where it's there's one obvious person who everybody's voting for. The show makes a gesture at this other thing that could happen, but basically the expected result occurs. And I mean, that was 6 episodes out of South Pacific, right? Or just or a lot of those kind of mid-20s seasons, where it was just they sort of were going down the line. So, let's enjoy the
No, I'm not complaining too much. I'm thankful for a very fun season of Survivor that we've had to this point, but we have to talk about where we are in the season. And it does feel like it's interesting that we have these people who were like the quote unquote threats and then the people who are the underdogs. And it does feel as though we could be potentially on our way to a pagonging of the threats from the majority underdog alliance.
Yeah. And people have commented that, calling the group of people with all the numbers and all the advantages, the underdogs is a little bit, it's a little bit, I mean, it's like self-aggrandizing, except self-minimizing as self-aggrandizing. It's like, because like we love underdogs. Now, nobody likes top dogs. So it's like self-aggrandizing in a kind of self-minimizing way. It's a little bit interesting.
Yeah. No, I think what's particularly interesting about this is that unlike, a classic underdog story like Survivor Marquesas, where there was the big alliance of 4 and then the underdogs came together famously with the coconut chop. And then, John Carroll and his group tipped off the order, and Pascal and Nalia and Sean and V and Kathy flipped it all around. It was like the underdogs came into power with a whimper. It was not as though, I guess, like the vote of Gabe was not seen as sort of like the rebel alliance coming through. It was everybody except for Gabe and Sue were in on the vote.
Yeah. And there was no, like, why we need to talk about, here's what I want to talk about, Rob. And I want to talk about how these people got chosen to be top dogs. Because the people who are allegedly top dogs have never actually held power for the most part. I mean, Kyle, you get it. He's like a challenge beast, right? Or what counts for one, 4 challenges. So you're like, okay, like that makes sense to take him out, although doesn't seem to have a lot of social capital. Genevieve had one big blind side, which against her own alliance. So if anything, she's an outcast, but I guess she's a top dog because she has like a big move under her resume. But like, let's talk about Sam, because Sam has, done almost nothing since the merge. Like he's got like no big move to his credit. Some people say like he gets credit for the Gabe move, but it seemed like everybody wanted the Gabe move except Sue. He doesn't have any kind of social connections. His whole story arc for the past 4 episodes or whatever has been how he has nobody to work with. He is an outcast who has had, has no challenges. And I feel, and this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and this is a great venue for it, that this is anti-hot person bias. That there is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was not where I thought you were going to go with this.
People see a hot person and they target them as a so-called top dog without any justification, just like because he's handsome and he's tall and he's fit. Like, honestly, it's sickening the way that they are targeting.
I feel like
these
it's
hotties.
more anti-tall than anti-hot person, but okay. Stephen,
well, how I feel about the state of hot people on Survivor. I've been very vocal that I need, more hot people
for
on Survivor.
some time now. Yes, you feel like that you need more people who are. Yes,
this is not going to happen if this is how they're treated.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's necessarily. I feel like that. I don't even know how to rebuttal what this is. I don't think it's necessarily because I feel like that you have some other good-looking people that are.
No, but come on, this is clearly what it is. Like Sam looks like someone who could have won a 30 season, and therefore he's like
I think he is battling the perception, and I think he talked about this of like, hey, I'm not a wolf in sheep's clothing. I'm a wolf in wolf's clothing. I think he looks the part.
He's a sheep in wolf's clothing. He's like he's not a sheep. He's like a dog, in wolf's clothing. We love a dog. I love Sam. Yeah.
Look, nothing against Sam. I think that he came in as sort of like the person who was kind of seen as like the jock of this group of 18. And I think that in, more classic Survivor, he might be one jock of 4 or 5 jocks in the cast. Right. But in this season, that he's really kind of the only person that is like in that archetype. And so I think he stands out a little bit more for that. I think he's also seen as a person who was in power. And I think that across the 3 tribes, we saw that anybody who was seen as like the leader of their respective tribes in Gabe and Sam and I guess Genevieve, for lack of like another person who stood out as like the leader of that group. I think that all three of the tribes have sort of like flipped against their initial power structure, and all the people who are at the bottom of the three tribes have sort of come together. And so I think that for Sam, I think that he is, lumped in because of that. I do think
Well,
that you,
go ahead.
I don't like completely disagree with what you're saying, but I don't think that's the only reason.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of it is the pre-merge, like, and it's cool that like it often seems on Survivor that kind of what happens in the pre-merge is like a black box, and then like everything afterwards, like you like there's no no reference almost to the pre-merge, but it is kind of I do think a lot of Sam's the problems that Sam is facing are because he did play such a dominant role in that pre-merge. He was clearly like the leading, what was happening on his tribe in the pre-merge, and he was the glue guy, and he was allied with everybody, and he was kind of he kind of made the call of certainly the Annika vote, instead of Andy at that crucial vote. So it's I do think that perception is in some ways deserved.
Sure.
But it is funny that like if you look at like someone, like Rachel, who now has, immunity wins, like multiple advantages, in with everybody, and she is the top dog. Sam is not the top dog.
Brian in the chat says that TK was also a jock, but he got voted out early. That is fair. So Stephen, I think the interesting question to deal with is sort of this predicament that we saw Kyle and Genevieve and Sam in now, whereas the players that are voting, these underdogs, are sort of like locked in on like, oh, these are the threats. We're making big moves. We're taking out the big players. But from the perspective of Sam and Genevieve and Kyle really was never in power. But for Sam in particular, it's like, hey, I don't have power now. I had power a week ago. What are you doing? Why are you coming after me? I don't have any pull in this game.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that but who does? That's kind of what's like sort of interesting about this season. It's like there is nobody who, and Gabe was probably the person who was closest to that, right? Like he did have an actual formed alliance around him to a certain degree. But like really nobody else in this game is kind of got that. Like who's got a solid alliance in this game now that Gabe is gone?
Yeah, I think that Caroline and Sue certainly have something together, and I don't know, like maybe are Genevieve and Sam sort of like the second closest? I know that Andy, Teeny, Rachel talk about a final three, but I don't know how solid that is necessarily. Let's stick with this plight of the top dogs in terms of like what they're going to do. Stephen, is there a way that they could change the perception, or are they, as I was saying earlier on the patron call, is Sam sort of like in the Troyzan zone of like that there's nothing, the more he tries to get out of this predicament that he's in, the more the other players are going to be locked in on trying to get him out?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, what is he? I mean, like, it's really true that on Survivor, like once you're kind of like on the target list, and especially like at this stage in the game when people are really imagining what their end game is, it's so hard to get out of that. That said, I mean, this is what I want to kind of talk about. This is something that's been like sort of I've been mulling as like a general kind of like philosophy of like what to do in this sort of like late mid game of Survivor. So I tweeted that the big mistake for the Tukus and Genevieve to vote out Gabe last week. Okay.
Yeah.
Because and a lot of people were like, yeah, but the real mistake was Genevieve voting out Saul. Unquestionably, we all agree baseline is Genevieve voting out Saul, game shattering mistake. But so the question of like, was it a big mistake for the Tukus and Genevieve to vote out Gabe last week?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we think it's a mistake for like Kyle and Caroline, maybe, questionably Caroline. But the question is like, was it right should Genevieve, who was the other target last week, would it have been a smarter move for her to join the Tukus for like a vote to take out one of these kind of like randoms, like kind of her strategy now of like, let's get out the people who are going to take up the spots in the end game? Or by letting those 4 Tuku stay in the game, like, do you just want to, is she like basically screwing over her endgame? Like, do you just want to make it one more vote, or are you trying in Contemporary Survivor to like set up your endgame?
Such a fun thing to talk about, because that I don't believe that anybody, and maybe there was some pundit that was out there. I don't think that this was discussed last week. Where was this? Is this a mistake for Sam and Genevieve to have voted out Gabe this week? I mean, I think that from Kyle's perspective, it was talked about of like, what is Kyle doing? But I don't think anybody, Sam himself, was like, this is great. I feel like I'm getting my groove back. And Genevieve, I think after the Saul vote, she ends up being so relieved that it's not her. I don't think that we were really looking at this from the perspective of, is this a mistake to get rid of Gabe? And also from Gabe's perspective, that should Gabe have been looking at, hey, I need to, like, Gabe was very concerned about getting past the final 9. He was targeting Genevieve. I feel like that in hindsight, it seems very clear that Gabe should have been working with the other threats at the point that he ended up going out, because it would have saved him and potentially given him a path to the end, instead of just hoping that Sue, he had in Sue somebody, a lamb that he was going to be able to drag to the end, but not in Caroline. And he kind of had all his eggs in that basket, where for Gabe, I think the better play would have been to try to ID the other threats and try to figure out a way to work with them to get out all the people who were the non-threats.
Yeah, I agree. And what's interesting, like, is, that but is that a mistake for, I'm sure a lot of that came down to time too, right? Like, so much of that is who won immunity. You have like 30 minutes to scramble before tribal council, and then off you go. But like, was that a mistake for Genevieve, because like there's obviously a huge risk, and Josh Kettles made this point very beautifully on Twitter, like, to let 4 Tukus get to the final 8. But, I argued that, like, for Genevieve to be the 5th person among 4 Tukus, like there's a lot of precedent for that person doing very well, right? The last person standing who's not part of the majority alliance. So I just wonder, like, but now, we say all the time now when we talk about Contemporary Survivor, we say you just want to make it one more week because like the game changes so fast.
So I think that Genevieve was kind of onto this a couple of weeks ago when she said, I don't want to vote out Sam. I want to go after the sneakier threats. I want to go after the Rachels. And so when there are going to be last week, I think that there were 7 votes on Gabe. It was a 7-2 vote when Gabe went out. Like, I really think that Survivor players need to look at, when 7 people are voting for Gabe, at least a few of them, like, we're going to look back and we'll say, like, okay, at least 3 people are making a mistake, because when we get to the final 4, like, there's going to be at least, 3 people from this 7 that won't be there. Who's making the mistake? And I don't think that Genevieve and Sam even thought of the idea that they were part of the people that were making a mistake on that vote. And it turns out that the people like Caroline was making the right decision. I think that in hindsight, I think that the move for Sam, for Kyle, for Genevieve, and ultimately for Gabe would have been to take out Caroline at that point. Because you take out one of the numbers of Tuku, and for Gabe, he's a little bit like burning the boats. But I think that he is like, especially at the point where, my name is out there. I think that for Gabe, it would have been a really good pivot to get rid of one of the other Tukus, split up Caroline and Sue, and then ultimately, like, he's still got Sue in his pocket. He could work with the other threats of like, hey, let's go after Teeny. Let's go after Andy. And I think that you could have like had a, team of rivals potentially. Yeah. That's like, it's interesting. Our best interest. Like, let's get to the end. But the thing is, there are 2 factors that motivate the human beings. And that is fear, and that is greed. And ultimately, the greed of these big players is such that they're never going to be able to work with them, and that the fear of the other players is so strong that they just want to take out these other players that could win.
Yeah, but that was what made, Jeremy or, Tony so great. It's like they wanted to keep those big threats around in order to keep the heat off of themselves. So that was,
But I think that, and a lot of this has been made of the lions and the hyenas, but I think that Tony in Winners at War. He talked about it, but I think at the end of the day, I think that he sort of like led people along to feel like, hey, I'm working, let's do this. We're working with the Lions, but then kept around a few of the hyenas like Nick and Ben and Denise. And I think that there was like a betrayal of the Lions. And that's ultimately how this seems to pan out. Of it's like, okay, let me get the other Lions to do some things that may not be in their best interest. And then when I've got my goats that I know I can shepherd to the end, I'm going to flip the script on the other Lions.
Yeah, but that was why Tony, and Cagayan kept around Spencer, was because he knew that like as long as Spencer was there, people would be more, focused on getting Spencer out. Really interesting. So everyone screwed up. I actually still think this was a bad move for Caroline, by the way, voting out Gabe, because I still think that she would have been better served to be in a position where she is, because Gabe was always going to be the big target. So to just too soon for them.
Yeah, but I didn't see it as much for Caroline as I did after this episode. I actually see a really good path for Caroline now. I thought it was a mistake when it happened, but now I guess I'm being results oriented, where I feel like that she's sort of like the person who's lying in the weeds in the group of the underdogs. And I think that eventually Rachel, who had such a great week, and we should talk about the greatness of Rachel, I think Rachel is going to be that person who gets pushed out in front of the bus from that group of 5, who ends up being, we can't let her get to the end.
Yep. Fire loser.
You think fire loser?
I think final 5 target, but she idles her way into 4.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I had made the comparison before on the Q&A of like maybe like a Survivor 41-esque ending with this group of underdogs where Rachel is the Ricard of this group, of the person who's part of like the team of underdogs that ultimately like it's like, okay, well, we obviously can't take this person to the end. Andy is the Xander, the person, the young guy, young guy who, feels like, okay, he's told us about his game, but maybe the other players aren't necessarily looking at him. And then you have Caroline and Sue are sort of like the Erica and Heather duo.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. There's no Teeny. I'm sorry, we don't have the spot for you in this analogy. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm still feeling very positive about Teeny, because I feel
Sam
like
and Genevieve are Danny and Deshawn.
Yeah.
That makes her Liana.
Okay. Yeah. And then who was her Shan? That Liana bonded.
Who was the Shan that went out? I guess Kyle. So maybe Gabe. Maybe Gabe was the Shan. Kyle and Gabe together with the Shan. I don't know. It's not perfect, but same sort of idea.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. Anyway, so for Caroline, I feel like that she definitely has a path here. I really, she's had such a great story, and she's really told her story particularly well. And so I do feel like that she's sort of like lying in waiting in the wings with Sue back on board. And I think that she, like Caroline and Rachel, are having like a very interesting, like, who's going to be like the under the radar person who comes out of nowhere and potentially wins this thing. I feel like that it's really between those two, especially for me. You still think Teeny?
It's so interesting. Like when Jeff was narrating like the challenge for, and he was like, Teeny, she's coming from out of nowhere. She's waiting for everybody else to make mistakes. Everybody's making mistakes around her, and Teeny, it's all Teeny. And then Teeny dropped anyway. But I did kind of feel like there was like a little bit of foreshadowing where she's just going to come from out of nowhere. And, she maybe takes out Rachel in fire making. And then they maybe take out Rachel in fire making. And, then it's I don't know. I also still see a world where it's Rachel. But because it does. Yeah.
Let's talk about Rachel. Because we're 24 minutes in, we haven't really talked too much about Rachel. What an epic night I mean, fishy for Rachel, right?
Oh yeah. Or Kyle's last chance.
What?
Wow, he's so beautiful. It was so beautiful. I got teary at Kyle's exit. Like, that was lovely. That was really, that was a game-changing move.
Steven, my mom was like, wow, Kyle, what a great guy. What a classy exit. That's how you do it. I'm so impressed with him. I'm going to remember what he said.
It was beautiful. And like, it was so sincere. And to have the wherewithal in that moment to like, give everybody a hug, say something like lovely to each and every one of them. I'm going to need a hug from you now, Jeff. Like that. I love that. That was such a great moment, like, It was truly like old Steven, when I wasn't held accountable by Rob, I would have been fishy for Kyle in that moment, because it was like, you moved me, you moved me to tears, and you deserve this nonsense award for that. So, but now that I'm
get
like
an honorable mention.
Honorable mention. Okay, that's nice. But yeah, I mean, fishy for Rachel for sure. Like, what a week for Rachel.
What a week for Rachel. She starts out in this very interesting spot of that we get a boat comes. And the two people that are on the bottom in Sam and Genevieve, they are vying to, we want to go on the journey. Rachel throws her hat into the ring. I thought this was a particularly risky play for Rachel, who has just sort of like escaped, where she came into the merge and everybody was looking at her. And then she had the safety without power and Saul saved her. And then there was still people were looking at her. And for her to have gotten back under the radar and to put herself out there like that, I thought was a risky play.
But the rationale was great, right? It was like, my game can't afford either of these other people getting it. And I think that is a great Survivor player, right? It's like, I need, like, it's trying to assert control when there's so much randomness, but like still you're trying to, like, on the margin, like, control where the things are going. So to say, like, I don't want to do this, it's bad for my game in some ways, but like, these two people getting something special is worse for my game. So I need to, on the margin.
I admire it.
Yeah.
Because there would have been plenty of people on podcasts saying, like, if, Genevieve goes on the journey and then comes back with something, everybody's like, how do you let Genevieve go on the journey? You can't let Genevieve go on the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
But everybody else was kind of craven and let Rachel just, okay, Rachel, you go for it.
Yeah. And that's great. It's like, not someone who's going to like, just like jump in there because like they want the adventure, or like, I'm here once in a lifetime. It's like, no, I don't want the adventure, but I'm going to do it because I have to, like, for the sake of stopping other people from doing it.
Okay, so she goes out there and goes on the journey, and then has this amazing, like, Rube Goldberg torture device. I think Mike Bloom called it like a saw device, and really, that was so incredible. And Jeff has a really great explanation on the On Fire podcast of like how they put that together. But I think that was masterful.
It was so cool. Like, what, like, just like the tension of these things, like, yeah, it's cool.
I think it was one of the coolest things they've ever done on Survivor.
Yeah, I agree. Like, super neat as like a challenge. And it was kind of an interesting advantage. I actually kind of thought the advantage was underpowered. Like, normally we're like, I'm very pro underpowered advantages, but like, given where they are in the game and what this like crazy challenge was, I thought the advantage was kind of underpowered for that.
Yes, I know, for what she pulled off. Yeah. So she gets the block of vote. You have any thoughts on block of vote at the final 8?
I mean, I guess it could be crucial, especially that final 7 vote where you often, and then, but it expires at the final 6, right? So
see, I feel like it was more important this week of it's the final 8. She could turn it into a final 7.
Right.
The final 7.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
And you could play it 8, 7, 6. So there's 2 even numbered votes that you could turn into odd numbered votes potentially.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. But I mean, given that this is such and I wonder how much in advance they decide what the advantage should be. Like, is it reactive to the state of the game? Like, do they want to put something in the game that's going to have impact on what's actually happening, or are they kind of like in advance? They say, well, this is going to be block a vote. Like, whatever happens. What would you do if you were a producer? You would make it reactive, right? Like, because you would want to be able to,
Yeah. I feel like that we don't ever really get, Jeff, when he talks about the game and what they do, that he always says that all the decisions are made far in advance. And I don't even know from standards and practices if they could change things up. But like, but also like you have like situations where maybe there's a lot of advantages in the game. Maybe there's all the idols have been played. Maybe like you just had a tribal council where all the idols came out or none of the idols have come out. So I have to think that just from, if you were going to make a good show, you would need to keep things flexible.
Right. And they can never say that, because then people, oh, it's rigged. You're, going for this person, or, even if they're just trying to like make a better game, there's always going to be someone to say, this is rigged.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a really exciting moment with Rachel out there on the barge, and then she comes back. What'd you think about Rachel telling some of the people about what she got? Because again, it's always like such a catch-22 of you go on the thing, and then I really feel like that for Rachel, she put some trust in a couple of people, Sue in particular, and tells them about what happens. Was that the right call?
Yeah, I think you have to. Like, if you don't like fess up, and hopefully she has the paperwork, right? Because if you don't immediately tell people, they're going to be assuming the worst. Like, people will always assume that you have much worse than you
Yeah.
actually do. Like, even like, I mean, again, this is about me. On Cambodia, when I got my steal vote advantage, and then I was sick, like violently sick. I think, I don't know what the timing was, but like the next day or something, 2 days later. Like, and so I was like constantly leaving the shelter to be like violently sick. Like, even Jeremy, my friend and ally, is like, he got some secret stash and he's going off to like chow down and be warm. And like, like people's minds, when they don't know,
like, come
even
with
your
me.
allies' minds, they're going to what?
Come with me, join me. Come see what's going on.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would have dispelled any misinformation. But no, but your people's allies' minds are going to go to the worst place possible. So I think you have to kind of say, especially when it's something benign like a block vote, like, here's what I have. And honestly, like, there's a rationale for just playing it, because it's so kind of useless that having it in your pocket is worse for you, than playing it.
But I wonder if the fact that it is like kind of an underpowered advantage, does that play in Rachel's favor, where she can come back and say, hey, I stopped Genevieve and stopped Sam from getting this. And look, I only got this block. It's only a block of vote. It's not, but I'm telling you, I have to share with you about what it is. So it's not like if it was like an idol or something like that, then it's like, oh, she's a big threat. But like, oh, she could block a vote.
Right. Yeah. I think that's right. But even so, like, I still think you don't want to be the one person out of 5 to be she's got a power, and it was funny that, there was this whole conversation with Sue where Sue's like, I really think sharing information about advantages is a sign of trust. And this is how I know I can trust you, is that you're willing to be upfront. And like, Sue's got an idol that she hasn't told anybody about, like what a hypocrisy.
Yeah. The two of them.
Yeah.
All right. So then she goes and then wins immunity as well, Rachel.
Yeah. Great. Very fun immunity win. Like, Kyle was truly steps away from winning that immunity.
Yeah. And ultimately Rachel ends up winning. And then there's really not so much, discussion of like a big move. It really comes down to Kyle or Genevieve. I know there's been a lot of talk about, was this the right decision? Which camp are you in? The team get out Genevieve or team get out Kyle?
I'm team get out Kyle. I mean, like, I don't. So yeah, I mean, my attitude is you want to get out the people who are going to be the hardest to get out in that order, basically. And so Kyle is the person who could be hard to get out because he is winning immunities. And Andy's logic, I know Christian kind of broke down Andy's numbers, but I think, like, for me, like, the biggest flaw, and I skeeted this on Blue Sky at Christian, the biggest flaw in Andy's logic was not just, the confusion of this math formula, but also the fact that for Andy, it was either like win or lose. Like, oh, Kyle won 3 and lost 3. So he's got a 50% win ratio, or like win ratio. But in 2 of those, and I don't remember all of them, like, Kyle was right there. So it was not like Kyle like lost. Kyle was like a very close second. So, he's always
and
right
one of
in
them
the hunt.
that he won, he was third.
Yeah, right. I mean, right, exactly. But, so I would want to get out the person who is going to be who might like stymie my plans later, like, more than the person who can't do that, basically.
Yeah.
And of course, like, Genevieve is like scary, but like, everybody's
spooky, scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am in the camp of, I would keep Kyle. I would want to get out Genevieve because I feel like I'm more intimidated of the person if I'm in the 5. Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm on the island, I want to keep around Genevieve. But if I am in that group of 5 and they're trying to decide between Genevieve or Kyle, I'm going to keep Kyle around because I'm not afraid of Kyle flipping my group of 5 against me, where I am afraid of that Genevieve being able to have the wherewithal to be able to pull numbers against me, or, come up with an idle play that's going to disrupt this group of 5 that I have.
But if you get to the point, if you don't vote out Kyle now, right, then you've only got Sam and Kyle left. If Kyle, it's reasonable to think that Kyle could win 2 immunities, meaning you're going to have to vote out someone in the 5 before you want to, if Kyle does that.
Yeah,
Because also, like, the
potentially.
fewer people that are there, the better chance that Kyle has, right? Because there's fewer people competing against him.
Yeah. So, you could flip a coin either way. I would be more afraid of, like, from the things that, like, I would be worried about trying to keep a group of 5 together. I think I'd be a little bit more worried of Genevieve weaseling her way into somebody's ear than
Right.
Kyle going on this run, this historic run, and winning the most challenges in Survivor history by far.
Yeah.
So, next time, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that this
I think it's, I mean,
Pagonging
Genevieve's
continues?
time is, yeah. I mean, I think we get Genevieve out, right? And then they kind of like have to like figure out, I mean, maybe the, if they turn on the 5, like, who is it? You know, who do, if Sam and Genevieve work to like skew the vote, who are they getting out? Right. Like, I just can't even imagine who that would be. Like, which of those 5 is the first to go?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different options that I do wonder. And even though Andy was very much trying to get out Genevieve, in the preview, they're talking about like a 4 women's alliance. Could Andy potentially get squirrely as be recognizing like, hey, am I at the bottom of the 5-person alliance? I think that's potentially one thought. I think also could Caroline start to get some ideas that Rachel is not actually the underdog that we thought she was, and potentially Caroline, who has been threatened of Rachel from earlier in the merge, maybe try to throw Rachel to the wolves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's and it was interesting that even it was not just that Rachel, got the advantage and won the challenge. She also was the person in the 2 final 3s, right? Like everybody was talking, and there were 2 final 3s being discussed. We saw Sue, Caroline, and Rachel final like triple alliance, and we saw Teeny, Andy, and Rachel triple alliance. And the one unifying factor there is Rachel. So I actually think she's pretty well insulated, from that. But of course, whenever anyone's whenever anyone spikes, that there's always a backlash to that.
Okay. Stephen, we've got some questions from people both here in the live chat and from the Facebook group. Okay. How about Julie has a question. What are your thoughts around Caroline's strategy of enabling Rachel to build her resume? I think she said that she's a shield now and a target later. Is that what she said, or do I have it backwards?
I don't remember, but
okay. That was the idea.
Probably a shield now and a target later. That makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like Caroline's kind of like laying the groundwork there for like Rachel to be the target. I still like my belief, and I've been, is that the order is, again, I'm always wrong. Genevieve next, then Sam, Caroline at 5. She gets. I didn't think about it. Someone on Twitter said like she'll probably be idled out by Rachel, which makes a lot of sense to me. And Rachel loses fire, and then we know the final 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about a question from Caitlin, who says, do we think that Rachel is doing purposeful jury management at Tribal Council? For 2 weeks, she's referenced the jury as power players at Tribal. Does this ego fluffing matter in the end?
Oh, yeah, it totally matters. I mean, the jury, I mean, Cochran said this, to me, I said it a few times, and it really influenced my thinking around the game, not my performance in the game, but my thinking around it. That like, the jury just like perks up when they hear people talking about themselves, right? That they're like, they want to hear about themselves and how they're influential. Cause like they're all narcissists. We just all want to hear like, how we affected the game, even though we're like stewing on the sideline. So to say like, oh, these are like the important people. These were the powerful ones. We're the weak ones. What are we even doing here? Like, yeah, I think that is absolutely, it makes the jury feel connected to you. The thing that turns the jury off is when players walk in looking arrogant, looking like they're in control, dismissing the importance of the jury. That's I definitely think that's Rachel doing that.
I wonder if we could be headed towards a season like a Survivor 43, where we have the players that are on the jury really feeling like, hey, we were the people who ran this game. We were the power players. James, Noel, Cody, Jesse, Carla, and like we're the people that ran this game, and you 3 over there are in the final 3. And I wonder if there could be some type of like a punishment vote in the final 3 if it ends up being, could the person who like, could they just go off the wall? A person that has sort of like a medium resume feels like, hey, I'm the best of the 3, and they end up voting for, say, like a teeny of like, hey, we're just going with the person we liked.
Yeah, I that's what I think is going to happen. Is that this idea that like and I think it's a lot of the the 40s have been just kind of like the person who's there, who's the best liked, right? And but you're right. I think 43 is a perfect parallel because so much of Gabler's even pitch, even his explosive pitch was like, hey, I was a part of all of your really powerful alliances, right? Like I was in the Baka Boys, I was in the other thing, whatever it was,
I love when you talk
so,
about the Baka Boys.
I that really stuck with me, the Baka Boys. Yeah. He was saying like that's where I was there with you guys, as you guys were making your moves, I was there too, and that was, Cassidy was instead like Cassidy was saying like, well, I was there making moves and here's my resume. And like Gable was like, no, I was like partnering with you as we all made moves together. And I think you're right. Like the jury wants to reward someone who makes them kind of feel powerful. And especially if they don't, if they don't feel like any of the final three. And again, I do think that might be where Teeny shines in the end, is that they are so well liked compared to someone, and if they just have like a little bit on their resume, that is going to be enough for the jury to say, hey, we really like Teeny. We don't particularly care for Sue and Andy. And so let's give Teeny the prize. I mean, to a certain degree, that's what happened with Maria, right? Last season, like Maria didn't want to say, call Charlie like the winner because I mean, whatever. This is psychoanalyzing someone who I've never met, but who like challenges my perceived position as the dominant player in this game.
Yeah. So I wonder if Caroline is somebody who could gets to the final three and has kind of like just like a medium resume and isn't looked at as one of the power players and feels like, hey, well, like I did the most out of I did more than Andy and Teeny and Sue, and I'm here at the end. And that Caroline feels like, hey, well, like, vote for me. I did the most. And they're like, no, you hid behind shields. We don't respect that. We're going to just go with the person that we like. I think that's a potential outcome of the season.
That's a great point. Like, even if they won't necessarily reward the person who did the most of the final three, they might just reward, out of like, right. I think that's a great point.
Yeah,
that's definitely 43.
You sacrificed us. You hid behind our big threat levels the whole game.
Right.
Like we're not awarding that. We're gonna go with the person that we like.
Yeah, I mean that's the 40s though, right? Like you just want to be the best liked person who happens to make it to the end based on all the random stuff that happens along the way. I mean, it does seem like actually things are kind of turning towards a place like we're seeing like slightly, with like Jam and D. Like it does seem like there is room for a really strategic player to kind of like shape the course of events.
I don't know. I kind of feel like that this season has been sort of like the most it's been where anybody who's deemed threatening is sort of like a very big target on their back, and everybody is sort of like very much trying to be under the radar and hiding and, hey, let's all gun for the biggest targets that are out there. I wonder if there's any adjustment that the show makes to try to, because I think that they would probably be more in favor of more aggressive gameplay, especially when we get towards the latter stages of the game.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so
I think Jeff's talked about it on the podcast about a lot of the game is about like threat level management, but I wonder is the threat level management so good that anybody who pops up to make any type of move is instantly deemed as somebody who needs to be very high up on the target list.
Yeah, it's too much. I mean, it's impossible to play now. I mean, can you imagine this happening?
Win a challenge, get an advantage. Like, okay, target.
Yeah. But that's what the game is now. And then, it's kind of like something has to change. And I do think we've talked about this before, but some of it is just the structure of the game where it's like so chaotic that you just do not have an opportunity to actually exert control.
The Lions need to get together one season. It needs to happen.
Yeah, but then like they're like split into like three tribes of three, and then like the Lions get picked off. It's just it's tough. But I do think like towards the end game, you're right. Like people are going to open up a little bit. Like that's the time. Like the final 6 is where you make your you do your like one thing. You do your one thing. That's the problem. It's not that voting out your ally is necessarily bad. It's just voting them at the final 10 is bad. You vote them out of the final 6.
Okay. Marietta wants to the avid Edgic reader Fishbach. What does it mean that the title quotes for the last few episodes have all been from Andy? I think that this came up on one of the patron calls recently, and I want to give credit to I think it was Stephen in the chat who pointed out that the record I think is 7 season titles from a player in
Wow.
a season, and
Is it coach?
and then a ton of people. I think it was Boston Rob. I think a ton of players are tied with 4, but Andy has now entered the rarefied territory of 5.
Wow, good for Andy. I mean, Andy gives great confessionals. Like, let's like, I don't think that is related because like I don't follow Edgic itself anymore. I do like try to like look at the edit and like the story that is being told. Like I think, I don't want to like get the Edgic people mad, so I'm not going to say anything. But like to me, like I like to see, my own feeling, as someone who writes, like what is the story that's being told and try to like analyze it. And I enjoy being wrong when I'm wrong. And I even enjoy being right even more when I'm right. But I don't think like, the episode title is not something that is really part of the story. That's kind of like more of like an inside baseball thing for like the really avid, viewers and fans. So I don't think that's like, they're not thinking that the normal viewer is looking at the episode titles. Like, I don't know the episode titles most weeks.
Yeah, I tend to know them in the lead up to the episode, but I kind of feel like I wish that the episode titles, I don't want them to be spoilery, but I kind of wish that they were like a little bit more relevant to what was going on. I think that this week's episode was called like flipping the win switch, and Andy said it, but it had nothing to do with the outcome of the episode. And then last week's episode title was called Loyal to the Soil. It was just kind of like something that Andy said to Kyle, which was not really, anything important. So I think we go for cool sounding episode title names, but they really have very little relevance to like the actual story of the season.
Yeah. And like most people are not thinking like, oh, there's just no way to like correlate that, and the story, they do tell a story to make the winner seem satisfying. Right. And I think like Jeff was very vocal in season 43 that a lot of people felt upset. Not that Gabler won. I think there was that, but that like it didn't make sense to them that Gabler won. And I think Jeff said, we didn't do a good enough job of making it make sense for our viewers. So, it is in their mandate to make the winner of the season make sense. So like over the course of the season, they are going to tell a story about how someone wins the game. It's there.
Stephen, let me bring you a question from our Facebook group. Josh Kettles wants to know, I need Stephen to weigh in on the great grammar debate of our time we're having.
I was so hoping I didn't have to weigh in.
What is the plural of shot in the dark? Is it shots in the dark or shot in the darks?
I mean, I'm going to defer to Nick Iadanza here because he is an actual English teacher and he has said it is shot in the darks. Now, I'm not even going to have an opinion. My opinion is whatever Nick said.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense. Shot in the darks.
It sounds very awkward. It's like, is it gin and tonics or gins and tonic? It's gin and tonics, right? I'll have 2 gin and tonics. You'd look like a crazy person saying 2 gins and tonic.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Is there anything else that we talk about that's a blank in the blank?
Jack in the box.
Jacks
in the boxes. Jack in the boxes.
Yeah, like put
2
those
Jacks in the box.
Yeah, put those Jack in the boxes over there.
How many Jack in the Boxes are there in Los Angeles? You don't say how many Jacks in the Box are there in Los Angeles?
Yeah. So it's plural. Yeah. Shot. It's just hard to say. Shot in the dark.
It's a mouthful. It is a mouthful.
But let's get everybody's shot in the dark. Like I think put the plural on everybody's shot in the dark.
Miss Nick on Blue Sky explains it. The grammar for it. But he's an English teacher and a writer. And a know-it-all, a know-it-alls.
Know-it-alls.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. A question from Stacy. I have a feeling now that we're just waiting to see who the third person will be in the final 3 with Rachel and Sue. I think that Andy is going to realize he is boxed in, and we're going to see Genevieve, Andy, and Sam go in order. Then there's a fire-making challenge to determine if Caroline or Teeny is there too. Are you feeling that Rachel and Sue are headed to the finals?
Well, I mean, I feel like I've called my shot in the dark here.
Yes. What? Remind me.
So I think that the next 2 are Genevieve and Sam. And I think it's probably Genevieve, Sam. And then I think probably Caroline is idled out at 5 or, otherwise I think Rachel loses fire and that Teeny beats Sue and Andy in the final. I could be totally wrong. Like,
Andy,
but that's just
Teeny, Sue. And then
I mean,
Teeny,
I see a world where Rachel is the winner. Like Rachel could be being set up now as the winner.
Yeah. Who's
that
getting eviscerated by the jury? Is it Andy?
Andy. Yeah, I think it's Andy and maybe Sue to a lesser extent. Like maybe they're like, Sue. Something about her age, some joke about her age.
So what do you think? You think it's like 7-1 for Teeny, 1 like Caroline gives a sympathy vote to Sue, and Andy 0 vote finalist?
I definitely think Andy's our 0 vote finalist. I mean, it could be. It's probably I mean,
he's
maybe
Andy.
Caroline. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see who Caroline votes for. That's actually an interesting question.
Okay, all right. Lydia wants to know: can you reverse the groupthink in real time? The perception of who's a threat and who's an underdog.
That's a really good question. It's hard. I mean, so much of the game, how it plays out, and then who's awarded in the final 3 is based on perception. And it's interesting. You can see kind of Andy bridling under that because he's aware that he is not perceived to be a threat. And he's like, no, I'm a threat. And he's like, in his confessionals, he's like trying so hard to make the case. Why? Like, I am a threat. I'm the one who's got all the alliances. I'm the one who's like the swing vote. Look, I'm playing this amazing game. Nobody's recognizing it. And I have so much empathy for that because he does seem to be playing a pretty good game. Of course, he has the comfort of nobody targeting him. It's a lot easier to play a really good game when nobody's targeting you, like when you're not like trying to stay ahead of the vote, it's easy to move between all the different alliances. But it's really hard to change people's perception of you. That's a really good question. Has anybody done that? Like in this like late stage of the game, kind of flipped people's fundamental perception of them as a player.
Well, I feel
like Marianne did that a little bit with like her kind of final tribal
a little
performance.
bit. She went from somebody who was not really considered to be a threat, and then at the very end she was able to do it. But I feel like that maybe the closest this season is Rachel has kind of done that, where she was sort of seen as like this threat who was somebody they have to watch out for, to now she's back in the underdogs.
Yeah.
But I think that, for a Sam or for Genevieve, and I think that this really speaks to something that I thought was so interesting that Genevieve's talked about, how I don't want to make emotional connections with players. Like, I don't think that it's going to be a logical argument that gets Genevieve out of this situation. I think that for Genevieve, what she needs to do is start to work on cultivating some of these like emotional connections with a few of these players to get them to see her differently, to potentially not see her as like the scary Terminator version of Genevieve. And if she can do that, I think she has a chance, but she's not going to be able to do that without making these emotional connections with people.
I gotta say, like, this is where I went wrong in Cambodia, and I've talked about this before, where, in Tokensheens, I had like such deep emotional connections with like, I thought everybody who played. And as a result, I had the social capital to be able to betray those people. But it like really upset me. And just like Genevieve talking about Kishan, like I was really like upset by it. And one of the reasons I didn't want to go back on Survivor was because it was really hard as a human to become so deeply bonded to people and then to betray them. And when I went back, I mean, I've talked about this before, but like Cochran, is like, I was all strategy. And I was like, great, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be all strategy all the time. And that's what I was. And as a result, I didn't really bond with anybody. And as a result, I didn't have when it came down to I didn't have the social capital to like get myself out of these tough situations. So you have to kind of like, that's the real hard part of this game is like, you can't hold it back. You have to form these deep bonds with people in order to have the ability to play the game, in order for them to trust you, in order for like, you have to like build deep trust in order to blindside people. Otherwise the blindside never works. And like, that's like, what's so like deadly and devious about this game.
Very few people are able to do it without forming those social connections. And, it is like a little bit of like a sociopathic tendency for people to be able to do that. I think that Cochran really kind of benefited from, having like a Dawn out there, where Dawn is like overdoing like the social connections with people. So they're sort of like taxed out. So they're not looking for as much from Cochran in that. I also think that this is something that, when Andy was talking about like how great it is, like, oh, we're blindsiding on this is hella fun. Like, I do kind of feel like, and tell me if you think this is crazy, that it's a little bit of like a younger person's game of that I'm going to just like betray trust and like just lie to people on TV. It's fun. It's all a game. And I do feel like that the players who have like are a little bit older, I think struggle with that a lot more.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good call. I mean, I've always thought that it behooved you to be a parent on Survivor because you have this deep first of all, it's like, gosh, what a vacation, like when I was a single person, like Survivor did not feel like a vacation. Now, my gosh, I can't even imagine. But yeah, I think you're right though, that like kind of like being a little older and having would make it a little bit more emotionally challenging.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like the older players that were really like just lying and playing in people's faces. I'm sure that it happens in Survivor history, but I kind of feel like that it tends to be more younger people that tend to be in that role on Survivor.
Yeah, that's very true.
Okay, all right. Steve, why don't we leave it there for this week until we get back together and talk about it? Kelly says Russell. Yeah, Ryan Russell's built different.
Yeah.
Not
how old was Russell when he first played? Like, now it's like
he's in his 30s.
Yeah, maybe like early 30s,
35 or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Yeah. So here's what our schedule is going to be for the rest of the week. I'm going to get together with the Purple Pants Badass, Bryce Isaiah on Monday for
Great.
Club Condo. Me and Bryce are going to be talking about everything from this episode and anything else that comes up on social media between now and then. Then on Wednesday, we have a special episode where I'm going to be in Houston, Texas. You could still be there with us in person. RHAPswebsite.com/Houston for all of the events going on there in Houston this week. But live after the episode, we are going to have Shannon Gus and Dr. Evie Jagoda after the episode to break it all down. And then I will have a special video of our show from Houston coming up on Thursday. And then we will bring you a Survivor Know-It-Alls on Friday. So it's going to be another jam-packed week as we get to the final 7.
Wow. Well, hopefully the next 2 votes are not just, a pagonging of the top dogs. But I
don't think so. I really don't think it will.
I hope you're right. I would like to be wrong about my prediction because it feels a little bit too, and I will say that almost every season has had a surprising and very fun ending. So like, I hope my read is wrong because it feels a little bit too neat, and that's often where I get into trouble anyway. So hopefully that I'm wrong.
Okay. All right. So Stephen Fishbach, enjoy the rest of your time with the family. Anything else you want to tell people to check out?
Yeah. Can I plug another podcast? Is that allowed?
Yeah, that's
I just want to give a shout out talking, Thanksgiving, talking about all the things I'm thankful for. I listened to the podcast Sleep With Me. I'm a chronic insomniac.
Oh,
Scooter. And he has been, it's been really, really helpful to me as someone, to get through the nights. And,
he's a Survivor fan.
I was going to say, not only is he a huge Survivor fan, he's a huge RHAP fan. And he has an episode just talking about what an influence you are on his podcast. There's a whole episode of Sleep With Me.
Yeah,
which I did not find actually like that to me. I could not sleep through because normally like his episodes put me straight to sleep. When he's actually talking about you and me, like I couldn't. I was a little too engaged. The whole premise is he tells an interesting story and it bores you to sleep. And it's like it's been like a real balm to me. And when I've had some like rough nights. So it's been great. And I wanted to show my appreciation to him. I mean, just, for all the, the help he's given me throughout many dark nights by shouting him out and saying, if you've got that problem, I know some people listen to you, too, as a, to help put them to sleep. But
yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah,
I don't mind.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah. It's a good podcast too, and probably the people listening to this are podcast listeners.
Yeah. So, all right. So check out Sleep With Me, especially if you're having trouble at nighttime. Don't listen to it while you're driving. And of course, make sure for all things Survivor, we've got a lot of other stuff coming in the feeds. Make sure you're subscribed at WeKnowSurvivor.com. Check out my Patreon Q&A from earlier today, 2.5 hours of questions all about this episode. So be on the lookout for that. And then also we've got lots of cool Black Friday stuff going on for Patreon. So check it out, RHAPswebsite.com/patron. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.